There is a reason why classical music has never died, why it keeps returning through centuries, echoing in cathedrals, vibrating through headphones, accompanying some of the most powerful emotional awakenings in human history. It is not just sound, it is a spiritual key, a code that bypasses logic and enters the soul, not through the front door but through the hidden passageways you forgot existed. And the moment it enters, something shifts, something ancient remembers, and something divine awakens. You may not know the names of the composers or the stories behind the symphonies, but your soul does, because your soul speaks in vibration, in pattern, in frequency, and classical music is made of exactly that. It is not built to entertain your mind, it is built to open the gates of inner worlds, to realign your nervous system with the intelligence of the cosmos, and to bring you back to that which cannot be spoken but must be felt. You see, most of us live from the neck up. We analyze, we plan, we control, but classical music dissolves that control. It slips past your defenses, past your identity, past your stories, and lands directly in your energetic field, where real transformation begins, not through effort but through resonance. Because resonance is not passive, it is the most active force in the universe. Resonance creates coherence, coherence creates clarity, clarity opens portals, and when a portal opens, your reality is never the same again. Think of how a single note from a cello can make your chest ache, or how the rise of a full orchestra can bring tears without warning. What is that? Why does that happen? It is not nostalgia, it is not culture, it is activation. Your spirit hears something in those sounds, something it forgot it was missing, something it always knew but had no words for, and that knowing, that remembering, that silent yes, is the beginning of your spiritual potential unfolding. Because spiritual potential is not some abstract concept, it is your capacity to feel fully, to listen deeply, to be present so powerfully that the world begins to mirror that presence back to you, and classical music is presence made audible, it is silence shaped into form, it is divinity in motion. And when you align with it, not just as a listener but as a vessel, something opens, the veil thins, the noise quiets, and your awareness expands, not up but in. And in that inward movement, you meet yourself, not the persona, not the mask, but the eternal you, the you that has seen lifetimes, the you that has walked through worlds, the you that has always known that truth doesn't scream, it whispers, and classical music is a whisper from the divine, a reminder that you are not separate from beauty, you are the vibration, you are the harmony. And your life, when lived from that place, becomes a symphony of intention, not random, not chaotic, but composed, and every time you return to the music, you remember the composer within you, you remember that you too are creating something, not with instruments but with energy, with decisions, with attention. And the more you tune your attention, the more harmonious your reality becomes. This is not poetry, this is physics. Energy organizes around coherence, and coherence begins where the soul leads, not the ego, not the mind, the soul. And your soul is already in tune. It is your human self that forgets and needs reminding, and music, classical music, is the reminder, it is the recalibration, it is the doorway back to center. You don't need to understand it to receive it, you don't need to analyze it to benefit from it, you just need to listen, not with your ears but with your being. And when you do, you will feel the shift, subtle at first, like a breeze through an open window, but then undeniable, like a storm clearing the sky. And in that clarity, you will begin to see how everything in your life is either in tune or out of tune with your truth, and when you feel that contrast, you begin to choose differently, you begin to align, you begin to let go, not because someone told you to, but because the dissonance becomes unbearable and harmony becomes non-negotiable. And that is when your spiritual potential becomes spiritual power, not force, not effort, not performance, but presence, presence that heals, presence that reveals, presence that creates. This is the true purpose of classical music, not just to move you emotionally, but to remind you energetically of who you are and what you're here to embody. And when you embody that essence, your life becomes music, not the kind you hear, but the kind you become, and people feel that, and life responds to that, and doors open, not because you knocked louder, but because your frequency matched the key. And classical music is the tuning fork that helps you find that key, not outside but within, always within. Every piece of classical music holds a story, not just of the composer, but of the soul it's meant to awaken. You may think it's coincidence when a piano concerto gives you goosebumps, or when a violin solo makes your heart feel like it's breaking open, but nothing in the quantum is random. Those reactions are your spirit recognizing itself in sound, fragments of you didn't even know were waiting to be seen, rising to the surface through vibration. Because music is vibration, and you are vibration, and when two vibrations meet in harmony, energy moves, and movement is life, and life is meant to flow. Yet so many live in dissonance, carrying trauma like background noise, moving through the world out of sync with themselves, and wondering why it hurts. Classical music doesn't fix you, it tunes you, it doesn't add anything, it clears what doesn't belong. And in that clearing, in that space, what was always true, what was always sacred, rises into awareness. And suddenly you're crying and you don't know why, or you feel peace so deep it frightens you, because it's been so long. And this is how the shift begins, not through more effort, but through deeper surrender, the surrender to beauty, to silence, to feeling. And in that surrender, you realize that spiritual potential is not a destination, it's a returning, it's a remembering, it's a resonance with the part of you that was never lost, only buried beneath the noise of a world that forgot how to listen. And this is why classical music matters, not because it's impressive, not because it's old, but because it's alive, it carries codes, it carries prayers, it carries frequencies your soul has been waiting for. And when you hear them, something ancient and infinite within you responds and says yes. This yes is not verbal, it's vibrational, it's a yes that rearranges your nervous system, that softens your armor, that whispers you are safe to feel again. And feeling is the portal, feeling is the healer, feeling is the frequency that calls your power back home. Because power without feeling is distortion, but power with feeling is divinity embodied. And that's what music does. It brings you back into embodiment, not just as a body, but as a being, a soul in motion, a symphony in human form. And in that form, you begin to move differently, to speak differently, to breathe differently, because you're no longer trying to escape yourself, you're inhabiting yourself fully. And when you inhabit yourself, you become magnetic, not by trying, not by pretending, but by presence. And presence is the most spiritual state you can live in, because presence is where the soul meets the body and says we are one. And when that oneness is lived, not just imagined, not just meditated on, but embodied, every moment becomes spiritual, every decision becomes sacred, every interaction becomes a transmission. And music, especially classical music, helps anchor that state, not by forcing it, but by revealing it, because the music holds no agenda, it simply is. And in that beingness, it becomes a mirror to your own essence. It shows you what it feels like to be whole, not in theory, but in vibration. And when you feel that wholeness, you stop seeking, you start living, you stop grasping, you start flowing, you stop performing, you start expressing. And expression is the language of the soul, and the soul does not perform, it reveals. And when you start revealing instead of performing, your entire life becomes aligned. Because alignment is not about being perfect, it's about being true, it's about being in tune with who you are beneath the noise, and the wounds, and the roles. And music helps you strip all of that away, not with violence, but with beauty, not with logic, but with love, not with reason, but with resonance. And resonance is truth felt, not told. And in that feeling, you come home, home to yourself, home to the now, home to the part of you that has always known, and was just waiting for you to remember. And that memory doesn't live in the mind, it lives in the music, and the moment you surrender to it, everything begins to move. Because when you move from remembrance rather than reaction, your life starts flowing, not because you figured it out, but because you tuned in. The same way an orchestra doesn't guess its way to harmony, it tunes, it listens, it adjusts, it aligns. And once aligned, the music becomes inevitable, it becomes effortless, it becomes breathtaking, and so do you. When you live in tune with your inner frequency, life doesn't need to be forced, it follows you, it responds to you, it harmonizes with you. And this is the quantum secret that classical music understands, that spiritual potential is not an achievement, it's a harmony, it's a vibration, it's a song. And you are the instrument, and you are the conductor, and you are the audience all at once. And when you finally stop judging your sound, when you stop silencing your truth, when you stop waiting to be ready, and just play what's already within you, you become divine. Because divinity is not about perfection, it's about authenticity, and authentic sound never lies. You can hear it in the cello's cry, in the flute's whisper, in the sudden pause before the storm of violins. You can hear it in silence too, because silence in music is not emptiness, it's power, it's potential, it's presence. And that's what you start to embody when you let music guide you back to yourself. Presence, not as a concept, but as a current of life, moving through you, speaking through you, singing through you. And when you stop resisting that current, when you stop trying to control the rhythm, and start dancing with it, that's when the shift happens, that's when the quantum listens, that's when reality bends. Not because you forced it, but because you matched it. Because in the quantum field, everything is vibration, and when your vibration is clean, when your energy is clear, when your soul is expressed without distortion, life mirrors that, life expands that, life becomes that. And music is your training ground, not just to feel, but to remember how to feel deeply, fully, safely. Because if you can feel, you can heal, and if you can heal, you can align, and if you can align, you can create. And this is the spiral, this is the secret, this is the song. And you already know it, you've always known it, but you forgot in the noise, in the rush, in the proving. And now the music is calling you back home, not just to relax, not just to enjoy, but to remember who you are. And who you are is not just a person, you are a vibration, a tone, a frequency that no one else can play. And the world needs that frequency, the world aches for it, the world is out of tune because so many have silenced their song. And your spiritual potential is not about being better, it's about being you fully, loudly, truthfully. And music reminds you how, by showing you what it feels like to be felt, what it feels like to be moved, what it feels like to be witnessed by sound itself. And once you've felt that, once your body has known that resonance, it will never forget it. And your life will start organizing around it, because the quantum follows energy, and your dominant energy is your choice, not your past, not your pain, not your trauma, your choice. And classical music gives you the space to make that choice, again and again and again, until the choice becomes natural, until the vibration becomes stable, until the sound of you is no longer hidden, or hesitant, or hollow but whole. And when you are wholly not by title, but by truth, not by religion, but by resonance, not by image, but by essence. And essence is what the universe responds to, not your words, not your wishes, but your essence, the real you, the raw you, the resonant you. And classical music is the mirror. It shows you your essence, not by telling you who you are, but by reflecting who you've forgotten, by vibrating at a level that reminds your cells what alignment feels like, what coherence feels like, what soul feels like. And the more you listen, the more you remember, the more you remember, the more you become, and the more you become, the more your life transforms. Not because of what you're doing, but because of who you're being. Beingness is the true sound of spirit. And sound is not optional, sound is structure, sound is order, sound is how the universe was formed. The ancients said, in the beginning there was the Word, and the Word was sound, frequency, vibration. And that sound is still moving through the cosmos, still birthing galaxies, still breathing stars. And when you listen to classical music, you are aligning with the language of creation, not metaphorically, but physically, biologically, energetically. And when you listen from your soul, not just your ears, when you feel the music as a current, not just as entertainment, you start to unlock doors that logic never could, you start to receive insights that effort never gave you, you start to change without forcing, without fixing, without fighting. And that kind of transformation is quantum. It's subtle but undeniable, it's invisible but irreversible, it's gentle but seismic. Because your vibration starts attracting new timelines, new relationships, new realities, not because you chased them, but because you matched them. And classical music helps you match them, because it doesn't distract you, it aligns you, it organizes you, it reveals you. And in that revelation, you return home to the self before the noise, the self before the programming, the self before the world told you to be small. And now, you don't need to pretend, you don't need to perform, you don't need to push. Because your presence is enough, and your presence is powerful, and your presence is music. When it's not filtered by fear, when it's not distorted by doubt, when it's not muted by shame. And that's the real gift of music, not just to feel good, but to feel whole, to feel heard, to feel seen by the sound itself. Because sometimes we don't need advice, we need resonance. Sometimes we don't need answers, we need harmony. Sometimes we don't need to solve, we need to soften. And music softens us, music softens the armor, music melts the mask, music clears the channel, so the truth can rise, and the soul can lead. And when your soul leads, your life listens, the universe listens, reality listens. Not to your volume, but to your vibration. And your vibration is what music trains, not by logic, but by love, not by concept, but by contact. And the more you are in contact with music, the more you are in contact with the divine within, the divine all around, the divine that speaks in strings, and pauses, and silence, and crescendo. And that's why classical music matters, not because it's old, but because it's eternal, not because it's fancy, but because it's foundational. It doesn't age, because truth doesn't age. And your soul recognizes truth, not as novelty, but as home. And when you live from that home, when you speak from that home, when you create from that home, everything begins to make sense. Not in your mind, but in your being. And being is the goal, not doing, not trying, not proving, being. Because in your being is where all your gifts live, all your clarity, all your peace. And classical music guides you there like a compass, without words. It points not to the future, but to the frequency, not to the plan, but to the presence, not to the outcome, but to the origin. And the origin is where your soul sings the loudest, the origin is where your truth was born, the origin is where your path begins, again and again and again. Not because you are lost, but because you are infinite. And music reminds you of that infinity. It stretches your heart, it opens your perception, it dissolves the lie that you are separate. And in that dissolution, you don't just hear the music, you become it, you become the harmony, you become the space, you become the silence between the notes. And in that silence, you realize something ancient, something sacred, something simple. You were never broken, you were just dissonant. And music brings you back into tune. And when you are in tune, you don't have to force alignment, you are alignment. You don't have to chase frequency, you are frequency. You don't have to manifest abundance, you are abundance. And that shift is subtle but seismic. And once it happens, you can't go back, because your soul remembers what wholeness feels like. And that memory is stronger than fear, stronger than noise, stronger than doubt. And the more you feed that memory, the more your reality reshapes, not by effort, but by essence. And the essence of classical music is wholeness, not entertainment, not distraction, not noise, but wholeness. It was written from soul to soul, from spirit to spirit, from one human heart to the entire universe. And you are part of that transmission. Every time you listen, every time you allow yourself to feel, every time you let the music breathe through you instead of around you. And this is not poetic, this is physics, this is vibration, this is biology. Your nervous system, your breath, your cells, they respond to music, not passively, but actively. They harmonize, they recalibrate, they remember. And when your body remembers, so does your spirit, so does your purpose, so does your power. And suddenly what once felt confusing becomes clear, what once felt distant becomes near, what once felt impossible becomes inevitable. Because you are no longer resisting, you are resonating. And resonance is the true technology of the soul. It's how the universe speaks, it's how creation moves, it's how timelines shift. And classical music is the language that unlocks that technology, not because it's superior, but because it's sincere in its beauty, sincere in its construction, sincere in its devotion to truth. And that truth lives in you. It's not separate, it's not hidden, it's not reserved for the chosen. It's coded in your being, waiting to be activated, waiting to be amplified, waiting to be heard. And music is the amplifier, music is the activator, music is the invitation. And when you accept that invitation, when you say yes to the sound of your own soul, the world around you changes not as magic, but as alignment, not as fantasy, but as frequency. And suddenly, you're not hoping for miracles, you are the miracle, you're not chasing the shift, you are the shift, and you're not waiting for a sign, you are the sign. And in that final movement, when the orchestra pauses for a breath, and then surges into its closing swell, you are no longer an audience, you are no longer a listener, you are the music itself. Your heartbeat aligns with the timpani, your breath follows the strings, your soul soars with the brass. And in that moment, you remember that classical music was never a product, it was never background noise, it was never outdated or irrelevant. It was a language the universe used to remind you of yourself, to call you back to presence, to pierce through the noise of life and whisper, "I'm still here, and so are you." And that whisper grows, it becomes a thunder, it becomes a light, it becomes a doorway to parts of yourself that no journal prompt, no affirmation, no meditation app could reach. And you realize the composers of the past were not just artists, they were mystics, channeling something beyond themselves, encoding frequencies into manuscripts that would one day meet you in a moment of openness and unlock what had long been waiting to be remembered. Because that's what this journey is about, not gaining, but remembering, not achieving, but aligning, not fixing, but tuning. And classical music is the tuning fork of the soul. It brings you back not to who the world wants you to be, but to who you've always been and always will be. And now you carry that frequency with you, not just in the concert hall, not just through headphones, but into your relationships, into your purpose, into your presence. Because once you've touched the timeless, you can no longer settle for the temporary. Once you've tasted the sacred, you can no longer numb with the shallow. Once you've danced with the divine, you can no longer move through life asleep. And this is the true power of classical music. It awakens you, it aligns you, it attunes you to something so ancient and so now, so vast and yet so intimate. It invites you not to understand, but to remember, not to analyze, but to surrender, not to chase, but to receive. And in that surrender, you become a vessel, a resonator, a living symphony, vibrating with awareness, grace, and presence. And that vibration changes your life, it changes your reality, it changes your relationships, not because you tried to fix them, but because you brought a new signal, a new stillness, a new strength. And the world can feel it, even if they don't know what changed. You've changed. And now you move differently, you listen differently, you speak differently because you're no longer reacting from your wounds, you're responding from your center. And that center is what the music gave you, a mirror, a map, a melody back to yourself. And when you live from that place, your life becomes a symphony too, not always perfect, not always pretty, but always present, always potent, always aligned. And alignment is the new wealth, not money, not status, not applause alignment. Alignment with your truth, with your essence, with the unique sound your soul came to sing. And classical music helps you find it, feel it, follow it. Because the composers left breadcrumbs, notes, frequencies, invitations into deeper seeing, deeper feeling, deeper being. And now you hear them differently. You don't just hear them, you feel them, you don't just admire them, you inhabit them. And in doing so, you realize that the same source that moved through them moves through you too. You are not separate from that brilliance, from that beauty, from that sacred pulse. You are it. You are the note, you are the breath, you are the silence between the sounds, and you are the crescendo that breaks open the sky. And that knowing, that feeling, that deep embodiment is the spiritual potential classical music unlocks. It is not outside of you, it is not waiting in the clouds, it's here, it's now, it's vibrating in every cello string, in every flute phrase, in every aching pause between movements, reminding you that the sacred is not far away. It is in the sound, it is in the silence, it is in you. And when you finally hear that, you are free not because the music changed, but because you finally listened. And in that listening, you found your truth, your center, your source. And you remembered that you were never separate from the divine, you were the divine in motion, waiting to be heard, waiting to be felt, waiting to awaken. And now you have, and the world will never sound the same again.